Hello everyone, my name is Gio. Today I have the privilege of creating a video on my 5 worst US presidents. I would like to preface this video by saying I'm creating it with my friends who pursued a career in education in mind. I will not be using any profanity. I will try to speak clear and concisely. It is far more important for me to be understood than only heard. Alright, now that we've established that this is school safe, thank you for listening to my spiel. Let's get into it. When it comes to the presidency of the United States, leadership can make or break a nation. While some presidents are remembered as heroes, others left behind a legacy that's far more controversial. Today we are diving into the top 5 worst US presidents in US history. And trust us, the damage they cause echoes through time. I will be starting at 5, working my way to 1, being my absolute worst president of the United States. Number 5. You may not hear his name often, and there's a reason for that. Millard Fillmore, the 13th president, took office after Zachary Taylor's death in 1850, and instead of holding the country together, he helped push us closer to civil war. Here are some omissions and actions that contributed to his reputation. He supported the Compromise of 1850, a series of 5 laws passed by Congress in September 1850 to address the issue of slavery and territorial expansion. One of those laws being the Fugitive Slave Act, a massive blunder, forcing citizens in free states to return escaped enslaved people to the South. That decision didn't just inflame tensions, it enraged abolitionists and morally bankrupted his administration, a law that led directly to the Civil War. He later ran the Know Nothing Party, an anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic movement, so yeah, not exactly presidential material. Number 4, Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson is often celebrated as a populist hero. But on contrary to belief, Andrew Jackson's legacy is soaked in blood, plain and simple. He signed the Indian Removal Act into law, which led directly to the Trail of Tears. Tens of thousands of Native Americans were forcibly removed from their lands, and thousands died from disease, starvation, and exposure along the way. It was brutal, inhumane policy driven by greed and racism. But Jackson didn't just stop there. He openly defied a Supreme Court ruling that tried to protect Native rights, choosing to ignore the law when it didn't suit him. The blatant disregard for the judiciary set a dangerous precedent for presidential overreach. He also waged war against the National Bank, ultimately shutting it down. That move destabilized the economy and triggered the Panic of 1837, a financial crisis that left many Americans struggling. Yes, Jackson was strong-willed, but strength without compassion, without justice, is dangerous. And that's why Andrew Jackson earns a spot on this list. Number 3, Woodrow Wilson. A man often praised as a progressive reformer, but when you really look at his presidency, it's a disaster wrapped in elitism, war, and a disturbing disregard for basic freedoms. Wilson preached about spreading democracy, but in reality, he believed the United States should be run top-down by elites, people like him. He thought the average American citizen wasn't capable of self-government, and that the executive branch should be essentially in control of everything. In his view, Congress was just a vestigial organ, something to be tolerated, not respected. He radically expanded the administrative state, laying the groundwork for unelected bureaucrats to hold massive power over everyday life. Wilson pushed the idea that the executive should be as big a man as he could be, continuing the Teddy Roosevelt concept of the bully pulpit, but taking it even further into his dangerous territory. One of his biggest betrayals came during the election of 1916. He ran on the promise that he'd keep America out of World War I. That was a major reason he got reelected, but as soon as he secured a second term, he plunged the U.S. into the conflict. And not only that, he used the war as an excuse to go after his political enemies. Under Wilson, the Espionage Act and the Sedition Act were passed, blatantly unconstitutional laws that criminalized dissent. People were arrested simply for criticizing the war or the government. It was direct assault on the First Amendment. Free speech flushed down the drain. And let's not ignore the racism. Wilson screened The Birth of the Nation, an overly racist film glorifying the KKK at the White House. He reportedly called it historically accurate. Meanwhile, lynchings were happening across the country, and he said nothing. Women were marching demanding the right to vote. He ignored them too. So whether it's his elitist philosophy of government, his betrayal on war, his assault on civil liberties, or unapologetic racism, Wilson earns a spot on this list without a doubt. Number 2, James Buchanan. If there's one president who watched the country burn and did nothing, it's Buchanan. He sat idly by as the country teetered on the edge of civil war. Instead of confronting the growing divide over slavery, he insisted the federal government had no authority to stop southern states from succeeding. Historians routinely rank him among amongst the worst. Why? Because in the most critical moment of U.S. history, he chose inaction. Number 1. Franklin Pierce. Franklin Pierce's presidency was a disaster from day one. He's not just a bad president, he's arguably the worst in U.S. history. Let's break down why. First off, Pierce championed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, a catastrophic piece of legislation that effectively repealed the Missouri Compromise. This allowed slavery to expand into new territories, which lit the fuse on violent conflict. The result? Bleeding Kansas, a brutal period of bloodshed between pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers. And Pierce didn't just sit back, he made it worse by openly supporting the pro-slavery side, ignoring the violence and undermining democratic processes in the territory. But it didn't just stop there. Pierce was a staunch supporter of the stubborn slaveholding elite, and he consistently put their interest above the unity of the nation. His actions deepened sectional divides and pushed the country closer to civil war. Foreign policy? Also a mess. He backed the Austin Manifesto, a secret plan to buy or seize Cuba from Spain in order to expand slave territory. When it leaked, it sparked outrage and made the U.S. look like a bully on the world stage. Pierce's leadership style? Practically non-existent. He was weak, indecisive, and heavily influenced by Southern politicians. He failed to calm the growing tensions that would erupt in the Civil War just a few years later. By the end of his term, even his own party abandoned him. He wasn't renominated for a second term, a rare and telling move. He left office with the country more divided, more violent, and more unstable than when he entered. He managed to divide the country even further while failing to unite his own party. I guess one term is all the country could take. Franklin Pierce didn't just fail to lead and stay complacent, he actively made things worse. That's why he earns the title of the worst president in U.S. history. So there you have it. 5 presidents who took the highest office in the land and left it worse than when they found it. Disagree with the list? Think we missed somebody worse? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. Hit that bell for more History Uncensored.